Soft rain tapped against the kitchen window as Ava stood alone in the half-dark, her fingers resting on the rim of a cold coffee cup. It had been sitting there for hours, untouched. Across the room, Mason moved quietly, almost weightlessly, the way someone moves when they no longer want the floorboards to remember them. Neither of them spoke. Neither asked the question both already knew the answer to. Silence had grown roots in that house, deep, invasive, patient. And the hardest part was that neither one could pinpoint when the quiet became louder than love. Every morning felt like this now. Two people brushing past each other like strangers who used to know the shape of each other's dreams. There had been no betrayal, no explosion, no moment of collapse, just an accumulating stillness that pressed against their ribs, filling the room where their laughter once lived. Ava inhaled softly, feeling the familiar sting at the back of her throat. It terrified her how easy it was becoming not to speak. And somewhere inside him, Mason felt the same dread, but buried it beneath a practiced calm that had become his second skin. The house wasn't always quiet. Months earlier, it had been filled with the simple sounds of two people trying, shoes dropped by the door, an accidental laugh during a late-night conversation, the clatter of dishes as they cooked together. But lately, every sound felt like an intrusion, as if speaking out loud made their unraveling too real. Ava watched Mason reach for his keys with a carefulness that didn't belong to someone at ease. He used to kiss her before leaving, even on days when they fought. Now he only nodded, a small gesture meant to be polite, but it landed like a door slowly closing. "I'll be back later," he murmured, not meeting her eyes. She forced a smile that dissolved before it even formed. "Okay, just that." One word each. It felt like the entire conversation carried the weight of 1,000 unsaid things. When the front door clicked shut, the silence that remained wasn't peaceful. It was accusatory. Ava leaned against a counter, her pulse thudding with a rhythm she couldn't calm. She didn't know when she began moving through love like she was afraid of startling it. She didn't know when Mason stopped reaching for her in the dark. Hours earlier, they had slept back to back, both awake, both pretending not to be. The space between their bodies felt like a border neither one knew how to cross without breaking something important. Ava remembered when that same distance was filled with whispered thoughts and an arm draped loosely over her waist. She remembered the first night they ever met, how he looked at her like she was sunlight he'd accidentally stepped into. She remembered how he once told her, "You make everything feel less heavy." And now the irony was unbearable. Everything felt heavy between them. Outside, the rain picked up, turning the yard into a blurred watercolor. Ava sank into a chair, pulling a sweater around her shoulders. She wanted to cry, but her tears had grown tired of showing up for the same ache. She didn't want heartbreak. She wanted understanding. She wanted to know why silence was becoming the language they spoke most fluently. Across town, Mason drove aimlessly after leaving the house. He told himself he was just clearing his head, but if he was honest, he didn't know how to walk back into a home that felt like a museum of everything he wasn't sure he could fix. He gripped the steering wheel tightly, jaw tense. He hated the distance between them. Not Ava, never Ava, but the inability to reach across the space without feeling like his hands might come back empty. He remembered when she used to look at him with open warmth. Recently, her eyes held questions. Questions he didn't know how to answer because he didn't fully understand them himself. He feared disappointing her. He feared saying the wrong thing. He feared speaking his confusion out loud would reveal fractures he wasn't ready to acknowledge. So he said nothing. And silence, slowly, dutifully, did the damage for him. He pulled into a quiet parking lot overlooking a stretch of water. Rain scattered across the surface like restless footsteps. Mason rested his forehead against the steering wheel. He wasn't angry. He wasn't indifferent. He was overwhelmed by a kind of fatigue he didn't know how to explain. the kind that came from feeling like every word carried consequences, every conversation could turn into an autopsy of something he didn't know how to revive. He thought about Ava's quiet smile lately, the one that didn't reach her eyes. He remembered how she tucked her hair behind her ear when she was anxious, how she lingered in the doorway sometimes, as if waiting for him to say something that might anchor them back into place. But he froze, not from apathy, but from fear. Back at home, Ava walked into the living room and sat on the edge of the couch. It felt wrong to be surrounded by things that once symbolized warmth. Throw blankets they picked together, framed photos from trips where their hands intertwined naturally. Now they were artifacts of a life slipping out of their grasp. She whispered into the empty room, "What happened to us?" But silence, as always, answered first. Her mind drifted to last night's conversation, if it could even be called that. She had asked a simple question. "Are you okay?" Mason had nodded too quickly. Something in his expression tightened. She felt herself retreat a little in response. The air shifted. Neither pushed forward again. It was small, barely noticeable, yet enormous. Ava lifted her knees to her chest. She wondered if relationships really ended loudly, or if most of them dissolved like this. Bit by bit, moment by moment, until you woke up one day next to someone who felt like a memory still learning how to breathe. The door creaked open. Mason stepped inside, rain dripping from his jacket. Their eyes met briefly, just enough to acknowledge presence, not enough to bridge anything deeper. Ava offered a gentle, hesitant, "Hey." He swallowed softly. "Hey." The room stilled, thick with everything unspoken. Ava felt her chest tighten again. Mason set his keys down and lingered near the doorway, uncertain, weighing whether to approach her or give her space. The moment stretched between them, fragile, trembling, painfully quiet, and the silence settled once more, folding itself neatly around them, like a blanket neither asked for, but both kept pulling over their shoulders. That atmosphere held the room, soft and unresolved. That evening unfolded with the same quiet rituals they'd grown accustomed to. Ava cooking without asking what Mason wanted. Mason drifting from room to room as though he didn't know where to land. Yet beneath the familiar movements, something fragile trembled, waiting to crack. Ava felt it first, a tightening in her chest as she set plates on the table. She had once loved cooking for him. Now she cooked just to fill the space with sound. Mason hovered near the kitchen entrance. He wanted to step in, wrap his arms around her waist the way he used to. He wanted to say something honest, something vulnerable, but every time he opened his mouth, the words tangled somewhere between fear and exhaustion. "We can eat whenever," Ava said quietly, not turning toward him. "Yeah." "Sure." His voice trailed off as he sat down. They ate in silence, punctuated only by the soft scrape of forks on ceramic. Halfway through the meal, the front door opened and a gust of wind swept in with Claire, Ava's longtime friend. Claire stood in the hallway, shaking rain from her coat, her presence stirring the room like a sudden shift in gravity. She paused when she saw the tension, her eyes narrowing slightly, not with judgment, just recognition. Claire had always been the type who noticed things others tried to hide. "Sorry for dropping by," she said gently, offering a faint smile. "The rain came out of nowhere, and I was passing through." Ava forced a smile. "No, it's fine. Stay for a bit." Claire stepped inside, bringing with her a warmth that contrasted sharply with the distance between Ava and Mason. She sat across from them, folding her hands together, her gaze moving between their careful, stiff posture. "So, how are you two?" she asked lightly, but there was an edge to the question. She felt the atmosphere the way people feel temperature. Ava's throat tightened. Mason glanced away. Their reaction said more than either intended. "We're good," Ava answered too quickly. Mason added a soft, "yeah," though it weakened in the air as soon as it left his mouth. Claire didn't press, but her expression softened with concern. "Okay," she murmured, nodding more to herself than to them. Moments later, Mason rose from the table. "I'm going to take a shower." He wasn't running from Claire. He was running from the truth she accidentally illuminated. Ava watched him disappear down the hallway, her chest aching. Claire turned toward her with the kind of look that didn't need words. Ava exhaled slowly and tried to smile, but it wavered. "I don't know what's happening," she whispered. Claire didn't respond immediately. Instead, she reached across the table and placed her hand over Ava's. Her touch was soft, steady, grounding. "You two feel like you're walking on opposite ends of the same tightrope," Claire said gently. "Nobody wants to fall, but nobody wants to admit they're slipping either." Ava's breath shuddered. "He barely talks anymore. It's like he's afraid of me, or afraid of something." Claire squeezed her hand. "And what about you? Are you talking to him?" Ava looked down, ashamed. "I try. But I think he thinks I'm expecting something from him, and I'm not. I just want him." The simplicity of the sentence broke something inside her. Claire saw it. "Love doesn't die because people stop caring," Claire said. "It dies when people stop showing themselves." Ava felt the truth slide under her skin, cold and sharp. She nodded slowly. "I know." Before they could continue, Mason reappeared, hair damp, shirt clinging lightly to his shoulders. He paused when he saw the tenderness between them, something unspoken passing through his eyes. Guilt, fear, longing. Claire stood. "I should go." Rains eased up a bit. Ava walked her to the door. Claire hugged her tightly. "Don't let the silence decide for you," she whispered. "Decide for yourself." Ava swallowed hard and nodded. When she returned to the living room, Mason was sitting on the couch, elbows on his knees, hands clasped. His posture looked like defeat disguised as thoughtfulness. She sat across from him, the quiet between them stretching again. "What did Claire say?" Mason asked softly. Ava hesitated. "She just noticed we're not okay." His jaw tightened. "Yeah." She waited, hoping he would continue. He didn't. Ava's voice wavered. "Do you still want to be here, with me?" The question was fragile, trembling, as though spoken by someone afraid of the answer, but more afraid of not asking. Mason's head snapped up, eyes widening, not in anger, but in fear. "Yes," he said immediately. "Of course I do. Then why does it feel like you're so far away?" He rubbed the back of his neck, searching for the right words. I don't want to say the wrong thing. I don't want to make things worse." Her breath faltered. Not speaking at all is what hurts. The truth hovered between them, thick and painful. Mason looked away. "I know," he whispered, but he offered nothing more. Ava leaned back, closing her eyes for a moment. She was trying not to cry, but tears pushed against her eyelids with stubborn insistence. She inhaled sharply, grounding herself before she spoke again. "I miss you," she said softly. The words struck him like a physical blow. He swallowed hard, unable to look at her. "I miss you too." But still, no movement toward her. No reach, no touch, only the admission, floating alone without action to carry it. Ava felt her heart tremble. She realized something essential in that moment. Missing someone wasn't enough if neither fought to bridge the silence consuming them. The night deepened around them. The lamps cast warm golden pools of light that somehow made the distance between them feel even colder. Ava folded her hands in her lap, steadying her breathing. Mason leaned back against the couch, staring at the ceiling as though searching for an answer carved into the plaster. Neither knew how to break the pattern. Both wanted to. Both felt powerless. Hours slipped by in slow, aching increments, until the clock chimed faintly from the hallway. Ava stood, her movements deliberate, almost timid. "I'm going to bed," Mason nodded. "Okay." She lingered for half a second, waiting, hoping. But he didn't stand, didn't follow, didn't reach. So she turned slowly and walked toward their bedroom, the echo of her footsteps soft but heavy. Mason watched her disappear around the corner, his chest tightening with a grief he didn't know how to name. He remained on the couch, surrounded by a quiet that felt heavier than the rain outside. A quiet he had helped build, even though he never meant to. The house settled around him with a muted creak, as if exhaling. The silence grew deeper still. The next morning arrived slowly, hesitant, as though even the daylight wasn't sure it belonged in that house anymore. Sunlight pushed through the blinds in fractured lines that fell over the bed where Ava lay awake, her body still, her mind anything but. She listened to the soft sounds of Mason moving in the kitchen. Quiet, careful, almost guilty. He always moved quietly now, as if trying not to disturb something already fragile. Ava stared at the ceiling, feeling exhaustion settle into her bones like sediment. Silence didn't just linger between them anymore, it lived inside her, a slow-growing ache that made her question her own voice, her own needs, her own presence. She pushed herself up, feet touching the cold floor, and stepped out into the hallway. The smell of coffee drifted faintly from the kitchen. Mason stood by the counter, hands wrapped around a mug he hadn't yet sipped. He turned slightly, noticing her before she spoke. "Morning," he said softly. "Morning." The greeting felt thin, stretched, worn from overuse and underfeeling. Ava moved closer, hoping proximity might soften something, anything. But Mason seemed to retreat inward even as he stood still. She hesitated, then asked, "Are you working later?" He nodded. "Yeah, I've got a few things to catch up on." A pause. Not long, but long enough for something inside her to tighten further. "You've been working a lot," she murmured. Mason exhaled, slow and uneven. "I know." There was more he wanted to say. She felt it, but the words never arrived. Ava looked at him, really looked at it. The tension in his shoulders, the guardedness in his eyes. He wasn't cold. He wasn't unloving. He was overwhelmed, lost behind walls he'd never learned to name. And she had run out of doorways to knock on. She decided to do something she hadn't done in months. Reach first, intentionally. It placed her hand gently on the counter beside him. "Mason, I need you," she whispered. It was raw, bare, honest. Mason froze, his breath caught slightly, chest rising then halting. For a moment, just a moment, his expression cracked open, revealing something fragile and aching. But then he looked away. Not because he didn't care, because he didn't know how to step towards someone when he felt like he kept disappointing them. "I'm trying," he said quietly, his voice fraying at the edges. Ava felt that sentence like a blade turned inward. Not because it was cruel, but because it was true. He was trying, in the only ways he knew, and those ways weren't enough anymore. Her throat tightened. "Trying silently doesn't help me understand you." Mason swallowed. "Talking makes me feel like I'm failing." She blinked, stunned into stillness. That was the first truth he had given her in weeks. He wasn't silent because he didn't love her. He was silent because he loved her and feared he wasn't enough. But love wrapped in fear grows quiet, and quietness grows fatal. Ava opened her mouth to respond, but Mason stepped away from the counter, tension rising in his breath. "I don't want to fight," he whispered. "We're not fighting," she said. "It feels like it." "No, Mason, this is me trying to reach you." "I know," he murmured, eyes lowered. "I just don't know what to do with that." The words landed like a soft, devastating collapse inside her chest. He grabbed his jacket from the chair. "I should go. I'll be back later." He didn't kiss her, didn't hold her, didn't meet her eyes long enough to anchor either of them to something steady. The door closed with a hush, not a slam. Somehow, the quiet hurt more. Ava remained in the kitchen, hands braced on the counter, the stillness pressed against her, suffocating. Familiar, relentless. She stepped back, breath shuddering, and slid to the floor, pulling her knees to her chest. For the first time, she let herself cry, really cry, without trying to hold the pieces together. Mason drove without a destination again, the roads blurring into a monotony of gray and motion. His mind churned, replaying every moment of the morning. He heard Ava's voice, soft but trembling. "I need you." He heard himself saying he didn't want to fight. He heard the quiet desperation she tried so hard to hide. He gripped the wheel harder, knuckles whitening. He wasn't abandoning her. He wasn't falling out of love. He was breaking under the weight of not knowing how to be the person she needed him to be. All he felt lately was pressure, internal, external, invisible, constant. Every conversation felt like a test. Every silence felt like a failure. And the more he feared disappointing her, the quieter he became. He parked near the water again, rain pattering lightly against the windshield. He breathed deeply, shoulders trembling with a frustration he couldn't articulate. He whispered to himself, "What's wrong with me?" He wiped at his eyes quickly, more anger than sadness, more helplessness than anything else. He didn't want to lose her. He didn't want to keep hurting her. But he didn't know how to bridge the widening divide. He leaned back in the seat and stared out at the water, feeling small against the vastness. The kind of small that comes from realizing you're the one unintentionally dimming the light you were once drawn to. Hours passed before he returned home. Ava was sitting on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, her face soft but drained. Mason hesitated in the doorway, as though entering might disturb a fragile balance. She lifted her eyes to him, tired, searching, waiting. He sat down across from her, not too close, not too far. His hands shook slightly as he rested them on his knees. "I don't want to lose you," he said, barely above a whisper. Ava's chest tightened. "Then talk to me." He shook his head. "I don't know how." He inhaled shakily, words stumbling out like fragments of a truth he'd buried. "I feel like everything I say is wrong. Like you expect something I don't know how to give, and I don't want to disappoint you. So I stay quiet, and I know that hurts you. And then your hurt makes me shut down more, and I don't know how to stop the cycle." Ava felt tears prick her eyes again, but softer this time. Not from abandonment, from the wound he had finally revealed. She whispered, "I never wanted perfection, Mason. I wanted you, messy, scared, unsure, anything but silent." His breath trembled, eyes glistening with relief mixed with grief. "I'm scared," he admitted. That sentence, raw, unclothed, trembling, hung between them. Ava moved closer, slowly, gently, as if approaching something still fragile enough to break. She touched his hand. For the first time in months, Mason didn't pull away, but the moment, as tender as it was, didn't resolve everything. It only exposed the truth beneath the silence, a truth that would demand its own reckoning. The house felt different as the evening settled around them, not fixed, not healed, just honest enough to hurt in a way that mattered. And the air between them shifted, not louder, not warmer, but undeniably changed. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It was full of everything they had finally begun to face. Night settled around the house, not heavy this time, but cautious, as though watching two people relearn how to occupy the same space without hurting themselves. Ava and Mason sat beside each other on the couch, their hands still touching, the smallest bridge but a bridge nonetheless. Neither spoke, neither rushed. Silence lingered, but it no longer felt like an enemy. It felt like a witness to a moment that had been waiting to unfold. Ava looked down at their hands, at how lightly their fingers intertwined, hesitant but willing. Mason followed her gaze, the muscles in his jaw softening. He let out a slow exhale, almost a release. "I never meant to disappear," he murmured. Ava's voice was gentle. "You didn't disappear, you hid." He nodded, accepting the truth without defense.
"I know."
She shifted closer until their shoulders brushed, a quiet contact that drew Mason's eyes to hers. For the first time in months, neither looked away. There was grief there, deep, worn, tired, but there was something else too, something that resembled the early days of their love before fear shaded their closeness. "I want to understand you," Ava whispered. Mason swallowed. "I'm trying to understand myself." The honesty landed softly between them, warm despite its ache. Ava leaned her head against the back of the couch, staring up at the ceiling. "We can't keep going quiet, Mason. Silence isn't neutral. It grows teeth." A faint breath of laughter, sad but real, escaped him. "I know. I felt like everything I said would make you look at me differently, and I didn't want to lose the version of me you believed in." Her heart clenched at that. Not from guilt, though guilt brushed her, but from recognizing how deeply he had misunderstood the kind of love she offered. "Mason, the version of you I believed in wasn't perfect," she said softly. It was honest. It was human. "I missed that version because he wasn't afraid to show me what he felt." He closed his eyes briefly, absorbing her words as though they were something he'd been starved for. She reached for his face, guiding him to look at her. "I don't need you to be strong all the time. I need you to be real." Mason's breath hitched, his shoulders trembling almost imperceptibly. "I don't know how to do that without feeling like I'm burdening you." "You're not a burden," she said, voice steady despite the emotion rising in her throat. "Not speaking to me. That's what hurts. Not your fear, not your confusion, your silence." He nodded slowly, the truth entering him not as blame, but as clarity. He lifted her hand gently, holding it as though anchoring himself. They sat with the softness of the moment, letting it settle. Minutes passed. Ava leaned into him, resting her head on his shoulder. Mason wrapped an arm around her, tentative at first, then firmer as the tension loosened from his body. For the first time in too long, the contact didn't feel forced or fragile. It felt like something they remembered how to do, even if the remembering was slow. Ava spoke softly. "We're not fixed. I know. But we're here." He nodded again. "I want to be." She closed her eyes, letting those words sink into the pieces of her that had been starved for reassurance. "Then we can try. Not by pretending we're okay, but by actually talking when things hurt." He breathed out, long and shaky. "I want that too." Silence, gentle this time, settled around them. Ava pulled back slightly to look at him. "Mason, are you willing to face the things you've been avoiding? Not for me, for you." His eyes glistened, not with fear this time, but with something nearing acceptance. "Yeah, I think it's time." They stayed like that, close, honest, steady. Two people not healed, but healing. Later that night, they climbed into bed slowly, almost shyly. Ava lay on her side, and Mason turned toward her. There was a pause, a breath, a moment of uncertainty. Then he reached for her waist, pulling her gently toward him. She melted into the warmth of his body, the way she had countless times before the silence began to grow. His breath brushed her neck, soft and remorseful. "I'm sorry," he whispered. Ava didn't respond with reassurance or dismissal. She simply took his hand and held it against her heart, letting the rhythm of her pulse speak what words couldn't. Their bodies relaxed into the quiet, not to escape each other, but to rest beside one another, something they had forgotten how to do. And the silence, for once, felt safe, felt earned, felt shared. Hours later, as dawn drew a faint silver outline around the curtains, Ava stirred. Mason was still holding her, closer than he had in months. His breathing was deep, steady, calm. She watched him quietly, knowing the road ahead wasn't simple. Healing wouldn't be linear. Some days would slip backward, some would move forward, but something essential had shifted. Silence no longer held dominion over them. She brushed a gentle kiss to his hand, then eased out of bed to make coffee. As the machine hummed softly, she glanced back at the hallway where Mason slept. Not all relationships die loudly. Some fade quietly, in the spaces people are too afraid to fill. But some, when finally confronted with truth, begin to find their way back, slowly, carefully, intentionally. A soft warmth spread through her chest. They weren't restored, but they were no longer dying. And for now, that was enough. The quiet in the house felt different than the quiet from before. No longer a warning, no longer a wound. A beginning, soft, fragile, real. Right now, your story ends emotionally with Mason walking away, carrying the weight of everything that just happened. But the truth is, what unfolded on the surface was only half the story. The unraveling between Ava and Mason grew from a deeply human dynamic, the silent erosion caused by unspoken fear and unresolved internal conflict. Mason carried a pattern rooted in emotional avoidance. His withdrawal wasn't rejection, it was protection. Men who fear disappointing their partner often retreat first, hoping that distance will prevent confrontation. In truth, the distance becomes the very thing that causes the relationship to fracture. Silence becomes a misguided shield that ends up cutting both ways. Ava carried the counterpart pattern. Anxious closeness, not demanding, not controlling, just afraid of losing connection. Her instinct to reach out collided with Mason's instinct to pull back, creating a loop they didn't know how to break. The more she sought clarity, the more overwhelmed he felt. The more he shut down, the more abandoned she felt. Both acted from fear, not apathy. Attachment wounds don't always present as chaos. Sometimes they present as quiet disconnection. Loving someone doesn't erase the patterns that lived inside you long before they did. Healing happens only when vulnerability is spoken aloud, when silence is replaced by imperfect but honest communication. Ava and Mason's healing began the moment truth entered the room, not to accuse but to reveal. Real intimacy starts when both people allow themselves to be seen. Not the version they think is lovable, but the version that is afraid, uncertain, human. And if you'd like more stories that help you heal, reflect, and grow, you're welcome to stay close by subscribing to the channel. If the message moved you, feel free to leave a like and share your thoughts or your own experience in the comments. Not for the algorithm, but because your voice might help someone else feel less alone. No pressure, just an invitation. A quiet place to return to whenever your heart needs it. Until then, take care of yourself. You matter more than you realize.